If I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced.
Hello there! Welcome to the Empowerment University Masterclass about the Apollo 11 moon landing. I'm Morty, I'm your host today. We're going on a journey to explore all things Apollo 11. We're going to learn about the astronauts, the moon landing, how it all worked and came together. So I hope you're ready, because here we go.
(1961), at the height of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. Just weeks later, the United States launched its first astronaut, Alan Shepard.
5 cabin, oxygen go, all systems are go.
He was welcomed home as a hero. But President John F. Kennedy knew that if the United States was to overtake the Soviet space program, it needed a bolder mission.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
As Kennedy addressed Congress, the United States had just 15 minutes of human spaceflight experience. No one knew if a moon landing was even possible, let alone in just 9 years. It would be an unprecedented engineering and scientific undertaking, marked by heroism and tragedy. The incredible task of landing an astronaut on the moon would be known as the Apollo program. Before NASA could start designing a spacecraft for its lunar mission, it faced some fundamental questions about how it would send astronauts to the moon. Perhaps the man best placed to provide answers was NASA's top rocket scientist, Wernher von Braun. Von Braun had spearheaded development of Nazi Germany's deadly V-2 rocket during World War II. It was the world's first long-range guided missile. After the war, he'd been recruited by the US military to assist their own rocket program. He joined NASA as the first director of its Marshall Space Flight Center in 1960. The most obvious way to complete a lunar landing was to send a single spacecraft from Earth to the Moon and back again. But a spacecraft large enough to carry all the necessary supplies, equipment and fuel for the journey would need an impossibly huge rocket to launch into space. Von Braun wanted to solve this problem by launching the spacecraft in pieces aboard smaller rockets and assembling it in orbit around Earth. But there was still the problem of landing such a massive spacecraft on the moon's surface. NASA engineer John Hobolt suggested another option, one initially considered far too dangerous by NASA's most senior engineers. Not one, but 2 spacecraft would travel to the moon, joined together. The first was a Command and Service Module, or CSM. It would provide fuel, power, supplies and living space for 3 astronauts as they travelled to and from the moon. The second spacecraft, the Lunar Excursion Module, or LEM, would land on the moon. It would be piloted by 2 astronauts, whilst the third stayed behind to fly the CSM. Because the LEM only needed equipment and fuel for a lunar landing, it could be small and light. The huge savings in weight meant this spacecraft could be launched on one smaller rocket.
Well, folks, if you thought landing on the moon was impressive, wait till you see how we got there. Coming up next, we're going to take a close look at the mighty Saturn V rocket, the biggest, loudest, and most powerful rocket ever built. This towering beast launched the Apollo 11 crew into space, and trust me, it was a real blast from the past. Literally. Okay, so the next segment is about to start. Here we go.
You're looking at one of the most incredible moments in human history. That's Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walking on the moon. Okay, maybe you've seen this clip before, but think about that for a second. They're on the moon, a celestial object nearly 240,000 miles into outer space. That distance is like flying all the way around the Earth 9.5 times. Millions of people around the world watched on July 16, 1969, as Apollo 11, carrying astronauts Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, launched from Cape Kennedy, Florida, and disappeared into the sky. It was the climax of years of preparation and research, and the pinnacle moment of the so-called space race between the United States and Soviet Union, a years-long rivalry to compete for dominance in space exploration. For the 8 days following the launch, the world awaited the return of the would-be heroes. So what actually happened between here and here? So let's start with the components of the ship that were discarded one by one until this became this. Here's the rocket that sent the astronauts into space, the Saturn V. The 3 stages of the Saturn V each played a different role in launching Apollo on a path to the moon. We'll get to that later. On top of the rocket is the actual Apollo spacecraft. It's made up of 3 parts too. There's the lunar module, the component that would eventually land on the lunar surface, the service module, which had propulsion systems for course corrections and entering and escaping orbit, and the command module, where our 3 heroes were for most of the mission. And last but not least, this is the launch escape system, which was designed to pull the command module away from the rocket if something went wrong during launch. Together, all these pieces made up the Saturn V rocket and Apollo 11 spacecraft, but it's the way they came apart that made the moon landing happen. The Saturn V's first stage launched Apollo, carrying the spacecraft 42 miles above the Earth and reaching a speed of about 6,000 miles per hour. The first stage then detached, and once the Saturn V's second stage kicked in, the now needless launch escape system jettisoned too. The second stage propelled the spacecraft even farther and faster into space, and after it detached, the third stage of the rocket fired briefly to knock Apollo into a parking orbit 103 miles above the Earth's surface. Here, final checks were made, and the Saturn V fired again to set Apollo on course to the moon, in a move called the translunar injection. Once the spacecraft propelled away from Earth, the Saturn V's job was done. Now, the astronauts needed to pull off a mid-flight maneuver to reconfigure the ship so the crew could access the lunar module, which had been stored in a protective compartment during launch. To do this, the command service module detached and flipped 180 degrees, docking with the lunar module and extracting it. In the process, they ditched the third, now useless stage of the Saturn rocket. This whole high-stakes launch process only took about 3.5 hours, and this, the completed Apollo spacecraft, was the end result. For the next 3 days, Apollo coasted through space, until it finally reached its target and was pulled into orbit by the moon's gravity. This is where the crew split up. Armstrong and Aldrin transferred to the lunar module, named Eagle, and slowly descended toward the surface, while Collins continued to circle the moon in the command module, called Columbia. Now, here comes another tricky part, landing on the moon. To make this historic moment happen, Eagle turned and used its engine to slow its momentum and ultimately touch down on the lunar surface.
The Eagle has landed.
The moonwalk was broadcast live on television, immortalizing Neil Armstrong's words here.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I think that was Neil's quote. I didn't understand it.
No, one small step for man, but I didn't get the second phrase.
After about 21.5 hours on the moon, Eagle performed the first launch from a celestial body that wasn't Earth, leaving its landing gear behind and timing its ascent with Columbia's path in lunar orbit to rejoin the spacecraft. Once Armstrong and Aldrin transferred back into the command module, the lunar module was no longer needed. Just like before, Apollo needed to break out of orbit. This maneuver was called the trans-Earth injection, and began the 2.5-day journey home. Upon approaching its entry point into Earth's atmosphere and no longer needing its propulsion engines, Apollo jettisoned the service module and prepared for re-entry, protected by the now exposed heat shield on the bottom of the command module.
Apollo blazes across the heavens, coming back to Earth at 25,000 miles an hour.
Parachutes deployed, and Columbia splashed down safely into the Pacific Ocean. And what was once a 3,000-ton behemoth of rocket, fuel, and freight was reduced to this: a small command module floating in the ocean, carrying 3 astronauts and rock samples collected from the surface of the moon.
Back in 1969, families all across America huddled around black and white televisions, living rooms turned into launch pads as parents, kids, and even grandparents watched history unfold live. With fuzzy signals and rabbit ear antennas, the whole nation held its breath as Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon.
Race 5 clear. Roger. And we're getting a picture on the TV. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
We could see it as it was happening. We could watch on live television.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And the fact that 600 million people around the world were either watching or listening on radio and TV as it happened is a measure of the impact that this thing had on the world's consciousness.
The surface, as we said, was fine-grained with lots of rocks in it. It took footprints very well, and the footprints stayed in place. The LEM was in good shape and exhibited no damage from the landing or the descent. It's a picture of the ladder with the well-known plaque.
Here, men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace for all mankind.
After the flight of Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and I had an around-the-world tour, and every place we went, I thought they'd, in some places, have the attitude of, oh, well, you Americans finally did this. Not at all. The attitude, every country, regardless of their internal politics, they all said, we did it, we humans.
Everything before July 20th, 1969, humans only had experience on one planetary body. From that moment on, we were, at least in some measure, a multiplanetary species.
When Neil and Buzz walked on the moon, they did it, of course, without weapons. The only thing they brought was cameras. So it was a peaceful enterprise, and one that was applauded.
This is CBS News color coverage of Man on the Moon.
The moon landing was must-see TV. About 600 million people tuned in to watch it live. When the Eagle landed in the wrong spot, it overshot by 4 miles and almost landed in a crater. Armstrong was a civilian pilot, even though most of the Apollo astronauts were military. Stuck on the moon, it could have happened if it wasn't for Buzz Aldrin using his felt-tip pen to fix the liftoff switch. The crew did leave something behind, medals, to honor the victims of the Apollo 1 fire. Aldrin conducted the first communion on the moon, but NASA chose not to broadcast it because of protests.
They've got the flag up now, and you can...
And you know that famous flag the astronauts planted? Well, it was designed specifically so it could fly in space. What about life insurance? The astronauts signed a bunch of postcards before they left for their families to sell as collector's items. And they weren't the only ones preparing. President Nixon had 2 speeches ready, one to celebrate and one if it ended in disaster. But when the astronauts got back, they did have something to declare. They jokingly filled out customs forms and listed moon rocks.
Houston, we have a problem.
And finally, are you a fan of the movie Apollo 13? Well, Jim Lovell and Fred Hayes were the backup crew for Apollo 11. And that's 11 facts about Apollo 11.
You know, landing on the moon was no easy feat. In a lot of ways, it was like parallel parking your car. Anyway, here's a section that talks about just that.
Okay, let's go there, Capcom on the hot fire. Okay, all flight controllers going around the horn, gonna go for undocking. Okay, retro, go. Vital, go. Guide, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. GNC, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for undocking.
Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins arrived at the moon on Saturday, July 19th.
When we did get close and we rolled out and saw it for the first time, it was a revelation. It was gigantic. It filled our entire window.
The next day, Sunday, July 20th, was landing day.
In a lot of anticipation, we finally come to the day, the moment that this is about to commence.
Landing on the moon was absolutely the most difficult piece of any Apollo mission, okay? Think about it as a controlled fall out of lunar orbit. The problem is, in this controlled fall out of orbit, you only have enough fuel for one try.
Capcom, we're go for landing. Altitude 4,200. Houston, you're go for landing, over.
The trajectory had been wrong. They were targeted into this inhospitable place. Then they had to fly over this area at a high forward velocity, then pitch up to slow down so that kill their forward velocity, and then start down like a helicopter. So now we're critical fuel state. And that's why the 60-second call was given, and then the 30-second call.
Then I really got nervous, was calling out 25 seconds of fuel left, and then 20 seconds of fuel. Oh, jeez.
Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
The landing to me was a great celebration. The nation was almost euphoric.
Well, it proved that the United States could accomplish tremendous goals if they worked together as a team.
20 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Take shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 20, down a half. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. I'm at the foot of the ladder. The LEM footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches. I'm going to step off the LEM now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Tony, this is so great you can't believe it. I believe it, Charlie. It's raining, John. Look at it go, would you, Charlie? You got all your steering and get straight. Oh, this is going to be some kind of different ride. Hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along. One ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good.
We're burning flight.
Roger.
Looks good, flight.
Nice shot, flight.
Roger.
Stand by for splashdown. Recovery, America, stable water, cruise go.
So the astronauts splashed down, the mission was a total success, and it was time to celebrate. And boy, did we celebrate. For weeks and weeks, USA, USA, we were number 1. Very exciting time for us. All right, let's take a look.
Ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
We have taken tremendous steps.
We choose to go to the moon before this decade is out.
We have achieved the earth-shaking, the breathtaking, the groundbreaking,
One small step for man.
and left a mark in the heavens. Our successes build one upon another and amplify what is possible.
The dawn of Orion.
It's time we take the next great leap. We're building the next chapter of American exploration, returning to the moon to stay, so we can go beyond to Mars, to expand what's possible and further our understanding. The architecture for these missions is already taking shape. We will go with new systems, bold designs, and a sustainable mission. You can hear it, taste it, touch it. We are going. We are training, testing, pressing our pioneering spirit into every component, defining our resolve with every line of code, and securing our success with every welcomed partnership. This is not hypothetical. This is not about flags and footprints. This is about sustainable science and feeding forward the advance of the human spirit. Because we are the pioneers, the star sailors, the thinkers, the visionaries, the doers. And because we stand on the shoulders of giants to go farther than humanity has ever been, we will add our names to the rolls of the greatest adventurers in history. Every day, every mission, we advance this calling. We are NASA. And after 60 years, we're just getting started.
Okay, that's the class for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Now don't forget to take your quiz and go live your best life. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
No, dadgummit.
Jack Schmidt having a few problems.
Hang on. Yeah. All right. Good show. I told him you were. What? Okay. We see that one went all the way in. Not quite. But there it is, all but about 5 inches. Okay. Boy, do I like to run up here. I feel like Bugs Bunny. You know, that's neat. I like to skip along. Not me, boy. Skip. Or whatever you call it. I can't get my left leg in front of me. Dum-da-dum-dum-dum. Dum-dum-dum.